Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to check on the status of the economy and business in Pennsylvania. It's about jobs, jobs, and jobs. But first, let's take a look at roads and bridge repair and where all that's heading for our important update. Back in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, joining me, as often is the case, is Bob Latham. He's the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. And I'll tell you, when we want to talk about roads and bridges, and you can't move about 25 feet on any road or bridge, can you, Bob, without seeing some kind of... No, it's a good thing.
Well,
it's a good thing.
We're closing down for the winter time now a little bit, so,
Okay.
so some of it shut down. But yes, we have a lot of projects going. You know, Terry, a lot of people ask me, well, when we had this massive funding bill, comprehensive transportation funding bill back in 2013, what exactly have you accomplished with it? What has PennDOT done with all that money?
Yeah.
And the answer is 90% of the projects that were what we call programmed or planned with the money from Act 89 are actually in the works. They're either in design, they're in right-of-way, or they've actually been constructed. So things are moving along. Over 9,500 projects,
wow.
$34 billion has been invested in the Commonwealth's infrastructure, and of course you're talking about jobs in your introduction. Look at all the jobs that's created, not just construction jobs,
Yep.
but manufacturing and
Yep.
others as well. So we've done a lot with Act 89. We're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish it, but there are some storm clouds on the horizon we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, so when this was projected, that's almost 10 years ago, right?
Right.
When this all got started, there was a game plan about how to accomplish it. Has that been modified at all? Has there been significant changes? But I joke about this, but I'll be serious. I mean, you literally, in the past couple of years, in season, whatever that means, you're the expert on what in season means, you couldn't drive 5 miles and not see some, I joke about it, but construction with road, are we getting anywhere in terms of the total necessity to make these big improvements?
Well, we have, of course, one of the largest systems, state road systems in the country. It's been stated over and over again. We have more state roads in Pennsylvania than New York, New Jersey, and all of New England combined. So it's a very big system. We have 25,000 bridges. We're that's in the third highest number of bridges in the country. We, of course, used to have the highest number of bad bridges. We've now cut that in half. We used to have 6,000 of those 25 were what we call bad. Now they're 3,000. So we've fixed a lot of bridges. And the thing, back to your point, is driving 2 miles without seeing a project. All of the work has been done to fix existing roadways. Not all of it, but almost all of it. So we're not building new highways with this Act 89 or transport or gas tax money. Mm-hmm. We're fixing that which we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point because, and you and I have chatted about this. Well, we all get a little, here we go again, I got to slow down. And it's obviously important for safety, mm-hmm. And I'm sure that Dave Taylor and Gene Barr coming up, going to give us a business update, would agree. It's essential for the economy of the state.
Well, look at the current economy and where the economy is going. We're now in what we call the Amazon economy, and all you have to do is go out on Interstate 81 or drive up and down and see all these distribution centers popping up. Well, something's going in and out of those distribution centers, and they're not flying. They're coming in on roads, and we have to maintain them, and in many cases we have to expand them in order to accommodate all that travel. Yeah, we are the Keystone State, and you have to come through here on surface transportation.
And we also, in major parts of the state, have important weather factors to consider, given, in the northern reaches of the state in the, Appalachian Mountains, and then we have the busy suburbs around the city. So we've got a combination of things. Go ahead.
That's true. As former PennDOT Secretary Mallory once said, we're old, cold, and we're wet. And that plays havoc on roads. So we have to continually maintain them and upgrade them as we go.
All right, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about something called money and the significance of how this funding, well, it's important how this funding is going to continue. We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, I'm talking with Bob Latham. He's the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors, all things about road and bridge repairs. This guy's the go-to guy when I want to find out, when I want to, get into a chat about it. All right, Bob, let's talk a little bit about the future. Where does this all go? Where's the funding? Where does it stand? I mean, this is critically important for the future of the state.
Well, here's the thing. I'm sure a number of the viewers out there are looking at this program saying, this guy's out of his mind. I drive the interstates, they're in lousy shape, they're in rotten shape. We have potholes everywhere. What's he talking about, all this accomplishment? It's true. In some cases, we do have problems with our interstates. In fact, PennDOT Secretary Leslie Richards recently outlined the fact that we are behind, in several $billions a year in upgrading our interstates. That's because we've kind of focused the Act 89 money on other things. The other thing I want to point out is that back in 2013, the needs were the overall needs were pegged at about $3.5 billion a year. Act 89 funded about 2/3 of that. We figured Congress might fill in the gap. We keep hearing about a national infrastructure bill.
Bipartisan.
Which still hasn't come. And I'm going to make a prediction for the new year. I don't think it's coming in 2019 either. So we're going to, again, have to take care of ourselves like we took the lead in 2013. 20 states have followed us over the past 5 years. Now, what also has happened? The Pennsylvania General Assembly and 4 governors have seen fit to take money out of the gas tax money, out of the motor license fund, and prop up the general fund and say, we're not raising your income taxes, we're not raising your...
we're taking money
out of the roads and putting it into the general fund. We're saying it's for the state police, but it could be for anything, quite frankly, the way it's going.
And let me make this clear.
My proposal is very, very clear.
Okay, finish your
thought.
What
I think we should do is not only just stop that as we have, and that's a good thing, we kind of put a cap on it, but let's roll that back about $65 million a year over the next 10 years or so down to zero. $65 million in a $33 billion budget isn't much. We have a number of our conservative legislators who said we can find efficiencies and we should be making cuts along that line. And that money could then be reinvested into infrastructure, which is needed. And coincidentally, we're talking about the money that's sort of equivalent to a penny increase in the gas tax that would be going back into our road network without raising taxes.
Right.
So we think it's manageable. We think it's something that ought to be talked about. So instead of just kind of sloughing this off and letting the gas tax money prop up the general fund, let's return that money back.
So let me make this point. No one is suggesting, for example, that the state police shouldn't be funded properly. That's not the issue.
That's not the issue at all.
The issue is taking money that was originally appropriated by the legislature for one purpose and then moving it around for other purposes.
Well, not even beyond that.
Go ahead.
It's in the state constitution that monies that are raised by fuel taxes and other fees on motor vehicles shall be reserved for the development and maintenance of roads. It's in the state constitution. So this may or may not be a violation of the state constitution. We're just saying that take the money that motorists faithfully are paying at the gas pump and put it where they think it ought to be. There are a lot of things that need to be funded in the general fund. There are schools, there's public safety, there's the state police and all kinds of things. They deserve to get all the money that they need. But let's stop playing this shell game where we take money out of one pocket and put it in the other.
Well, let me ask you the big question. How optimistic are you? Now, you indicated, and I tend to agree, infrastructure federally not likely to occur, even though it's bipartisan. But here we are about, let's face it, the 2020 presidential election has been underway, and now it'll take place in earnest, making it even more difficult in Congress to get anything done. But how about here in the legislature?
Well, we're very hopeful that as we have a more conservative House and Senate, and what I mean by that is, although there's been an increase in the number of Democrats, we have sort of an increase in the number of conservatives on the Republican side of both houses. They're going to be looking at putting their fiscal house in order, and this is one way they can go about it.
Well, as always, thank you. You'll come back and keep us updated on it. And now coming up, we're going to turn to a couple of the state's leading organizers, if you will, heads of important Pennsylvania business organizations, the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association and the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. We'll take a look at Business 2019.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, it's time to take a look at the health of the Pennsylvania economy, the business community especially, and where it's all going to go. Joining me, as often is the case, is Dave Taylor. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Gene Barr. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Gene, I'll start with you. Give our viewers an update. Where does the economy stand in the state of Pennsylvania as this program airs around the state?
Well, of course, it's always largely influenced in many cases by what's going on at the national level. Nationally, the economy has been pretty good. Of course, we've hit a few bumps here recently with the stock market. It came back again recently, but still hasn't recaptured. A lot of it's driven by concerns over tariffs, concerns over where energy is going, concerns over certain international developments. So we do have a little bit of that here in PA. We've seen an uptick in our unemployment rate. And unfortunately, as is always the case, Pennsylvania tends to trail where everyone else is going from a national level, which is why we come on so often and talk about what we need to do to improve Pennsylvania's economy.
But overall, how is the economy decent? Is it poor? Is it...
Well, I think it's a pretty good economy.
Okay.
And interestingly, everyone, because we've been so long in this recovery now that's 10 years old.
10 years, right.
I heard someone at a conference a couple weeks ago say, we keep trying to talk ourselves into a recession, which is an interesting comment.
It's a good way to put it.
Because everybody keeps, this can't go on forever. Well, it's done pretty well.
Yeah. David, take it.
Well, I mean, I think that the big story is going to continue to be American energy leadership and the transformative effect that this is having on our position in the world, the nation as a whole, and of course, by extension, Pennsylvania. But the challenge is that there are many opportunities. You see new pipelines coming online in Texas, in the Permian Basin, that production is continuing to expand there. And so there's a competition between the states for capital investment. And so we need our leaders in Harrisburg to adopt a pro-growth, pro-production agenda for energy if we're going to get our fair share of growth.
But you agree with Gene, the economy generally has been obviously much better than the so-called Great Recession. Our unemployment, as Gene points out, is up a tad, but overall, how would you describe the health?
B plus, and that business confidence is still very high, but there's a lot of upside. There's a lot of potential growth, but we've got big challenges, and in particular, the workforce. That we now are in a position where there are more jobs available than there are people who are looking for work, and yet we have a lot of people who are on the sidelines, and it's a very complex and multifaceted issue. But I do hope that this is one area where you can have both sides coming together, business and labor, Democrats and Republicans, to focus on the importance of work, the dignity of work, and getting people into a productive life.
Yeah, you're shaking your head with that.
I think you're going to see that as one of the big issues in 2019. Dave's exactly right. First off, we could probably be much closer to an A if we got our act together and began to develop the infrastructure the way we should on energy. But that industry, as well as others, is beset by a problem of not having enough people to fill the jobs. This year, for the first time ever in the history of our economic survey, that was the #1 concern among business people in Pennsylvania, the workforce issues. As Dave noted, you're going to find R's and D's, you're going to find conservatives and liberals who can come together, and one of them is focusing, for example, on criminal justice issues to bring people back who are into reentry, focus more on getting our veterans back in, re-engaged in this economy to where we can get them to where we can best utilize their skills, because we've not done a great job on either one of those areas. You've even seen President Trump moving forward on criminal justice issues, and some of that is workforce development. So it's exactly right. Workforce is going to be, I believe, one of the big issues in 19.
I think both of you have made a tremendously important point. And why? That's not partisan. How can that be partisan at all?
Well, it shouldn't be. And and again, looking at Pennsylvania, that Secretary John Wetzel, our Secretary of Corrections, that he was the one member of Governor Corbett's cabinet who Governor Wolf chose to keep on. And I think that Secretary Wetzel is a national leader on this, and that
and he's been on our program.
Yes, and that you look at the federal reform, the First Step Act, and that both Senators Casey and Toomey supported that. So I am hopeful that we can move forward on that together, but it's more than just the corrections reform. I mean, this is also about the opioid crisis and people who are unable to work because of addiction. This is also about welfare reform and encouraging people to move back to a productive life.
And it's also, we got about a minute left in this segment, but it's also about getting colleges and universities and technical schools and all the other places that supply the education with looking at the needs for what I'll call the new economy. That's misstated, but go ahead.
I couldn't agree more. And what we've done is, we've talked about this before, I know, but what we've done over the years has been really stigmatize those people who want something less than a 4-year degree. And look, we're all products of a 4-year degree at least. Some of us have even graduates, I understand. But, we've got to get back to where we can put people into the positions they want. It doesn't necessarily mean 4 years, but it's abundantly clear from everything I've seen is that a high school diploma is no longer sufficient.
Technical and vocational education are going to be highlighted, I think. All right, we're going to take a look at, can the Pennsylvania legislature, Governor Wolf, be helpful in all of this? We'll check in with that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, I'm chatting with two of the leaders in the business community. We're now going to take a look at coming ahead in 2019. Dave, I'll start with you. The legislature, the governor, is there anything on your agenda that you think they can be helpful with?
Well, what is possible in an era of divided government? The first and the easiest thing to do is to keep what works. And one of the things that's been working in Pennsylvania has been competitive markets for electricity. That was one of the keystones of Governor Ridge's tenure of moving to competitive markets for electricity, and it helps everybody. Pennsylvania today has electric rates that are below the national average, and so that helps give Pennsylvania businesses a competitive advantage. It helps individual customers, especially low-income people who spend a larger percentage of their budget on the on energy. And yes, and so what we have works. It works well. It's one of the areas that makes us a leader. So hopefully we can focus on that and remind everyone of why it's important to keep that in place.
Gene Barr.
It's important. Certainly energy is a major piece. We've talked about it on natural gas. Dave has talked about it with electricity rates. Again, we're going to continue to be talking about Pennsylvania's need to address their corporate tax structure, which tends to be and is one of the most uncompetitive in the United States. It's certainly one of the things that we've got to look at. We're going to look at a number of other things too. Last year, we unfortunately, we were talking here a short time ago about the opioid crisis. We had a bill that would have, in our view, helped address that. Unfortunately, that bill was vetoed. I think taking a fresh look at that is going to be important. And we've talked about workforce. What's going to be important is, as we note, there's a lot of new faces there. We've got a new House Majority Leader, so we're going to try and do that. And looking at where some of the newspapers have been, they said, well, geez, now that it'd be easier now that of course, now the Republicans have to work together with the Democrats. What's interesting is the Republicans who lost tended to be ones who voted with the Democrats. So we now have arguably one that is more polarized. And polarization is not what we need in Harrisburg or Washington. Unfortunately, I see still the real potential for that moving forward again. I take with note some of Senator Scarnati had some rather colorful comments about how we treat business in this Commonwealth. And he's right. We have so much more to do to make Pennsylvania more competitive, and we should be with the assets that we have.
Are you optimistic? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that Gene mentioned the pro tem, Senator Scarnati, and that the point that the senator made is central. That the private economy, that the private sector is a garden to be tended by government, not a beast of burden to be whipped.
Yeah.
And it goes without, it just cannot be emphasized enough that we are in an ongoing competition between the states for investment and jobs and growth. And if we want Pennsylvania to prosper and not get left behind, we need to change the mindset in Harrisburg.
This is not a criticism, just an observation. I mean, we don't know a lot about what Governor Wolf is likely to propose during, let's say, he's got 4 years, this year alone, much less over the 4 years. He didn't put forth an agenda during the campaign, much of one because he had a huge lead and didn't have to. What's your sense?
That's a really good point. And, there's a lot of discussion about what we're going to see in Governor Wolf's first budget address upon his reelection. I don't think we're going to see, I could be wrong, I don't think we're going to see the budget address we saw in 2015, where he listed numerous taxes. He said, as part of the campaign, I have no intention of doing broad-based tax increases. Now, people like Dave and I would tell you that a severance tax, a new tax on the energy industry on top of that, which gets passed to energy users, is a broad-based tax.
But it's not going to pass the legislature.
I don't see it passing. His view is that, what I took from that is he's not proposing a personal income tax or sales tax changes. So. And I think this year, because of how well the economy's doing, is not going to be a difficult budget, but we'll see.
All right, we're out of time. As always, we look forward this coming year to frequent updates from you on the health of the Pennsylvania economy.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, you stay well.